folks, I'm the Bald Guy, and these are Bald Guy Basics. Today, I want to review what I consider to be my trustiest and oldest chainsaw, the Stihl 021 chainsaw. The 021 was designed and marketed at the beginning of the 1990s. I think it was 1990 that it first hit the shelves, and it was available for sale through the first part of the 90s. I forget how long it went, but it has been replaced. And I guess, you know how we are. We get a new toy and we play with the new toys. This one's kind of been relegated to the back seat in the truck for me. But yesterday I went to the woods, and the 211 that I have, I'd stuck the nose of it in the dirt and had paid the price. I had a dull chain and meant I needed to stop and sharpen the chain. And I just didn't want to. So I reached in the back and got same saw, older model. The 021 is the same engine displacement. It's relatively the same horsepower. There's like 1/10 of 1 horsepower difference. The older saw has a shorter bar. It came standard with a 16. The 211 comes with an 18 in most cases. I think you can get the 16. So I appreciate the extra length in one aspect. When you're bending over and cutting wood on the ground, as if you watch any of my videos, you've been seeing where I've been cutting of late, and I'm cutting wood that's already down. It's been pushed down or cut down by a sawmill. They took the big end of the tree and processed it and left the tops of the trees for me to work. So I'm having a great time. And because I didn't want to take the time yesterday to sharpen the chain of the newer saw, I got my old faithful friend out. I'm going to tell you why I love this saw, and why, if you're looking for a used saw and you find the 021, I say by all means, if it's in running condition, buy an 021. It's not the kind of saw for a man who's going to run a sawmill, who's going to cut timber. But if you were cutting timber, you wouldn't be watching my videos anyway. So if you're a homeowner and you need moderate amounts of firewood, you want something around to trim trees or something, this saw is a really fine piece of hardware for you to own. I'm going to give you some basic differences with the saw. By the way, while this came with a 16-inch bar, I can go, if I want to spend the money, and buy an 18-inch bar. It cost me roughly $50 plus the cost of a chain. But basic differences. Number one, you see we've got two bar nuts on this saw. This saw has a double post setup that the bar sits on, and you tighten up 2 nuts. The newer saw has 1, and then it has a fixed post that the bar just slides over it. If it's a major problem for you to loosen and tighten 2 nuts as opposed to 1, okay, go get the new saw. Not a problem at all. On the other side, try not to cut my chin here, you will notice that the gas cap and the oil cap are the old style, which means you have to insert either a screwdriver, or I use my chainsaw tool, as most people did, to both loosen and to tighten the reservoirs for gas and oil. Again, you're going to have your chainsaw tool with you, because on the other end of it is your wrench for the bar nuts. So it's not a problem. I will admit that the new quick release caps on the newer saw is a very handy thing to have, because if I'm not going to be working on my chain, I don't have to get that tool out to begin with. But it's almost an irrelevant thing, because I've got the new tool. I've got the tool whether I'm with the new saw or the old one, because it's just necessary. Other than that, one of the biggest differences I saw that favors this saw, the chain brake, standard Stihl chain brake, works on the new saws and the old saws just the same way. The weight, this saw is slightly heavier, and when I say slightly, it's like half a pound difference in the saws, which is, if you saw much, it's noticeable, but just barely so. But the real difference I noticed about this saw, now I was cutting in the wood yesterday. A short saw, again, you're not going to cut saw timber with it anyway, but a short saw is so handy when you're in the, my pile of wood right now looks like pixie sticks, where all these trees are pushed over and they're all laying against each other, and I'm having to maneuver between the branches. Some of the cuts, because of it, the way it lays, some of the cuts I need to cut from the top and others from the bottom, and I need a nimble, maneuverable saw. A long bar saw would have been in my way. It would have made my job harder, not easier, even though I would have had more horsepower. But the thing I notice about this saw that I love better than the new saw. Now, I told you I've been playing with the new saw for the last few weeks, and this one has set. It has set week after week. We've just hit spring here, but I've been cutting through the winter, and this saw stays in the back seat of my truck, not in the bed of the truck, but in the back seat. Got the extended cab, and it's a little more secure that way. But on warm days, and we had a lot of 70-degree days in February, and now we're into March, and we had an 80-degree day yesterday. This thing has set. You know what happens in a truck? It's the greenhouse effect. So 80 degrees turns into 100 degrees. Or we had some nights that were 22, 23 degrees or less. And so this thing goes from a deep freeze to an oven and back and forth and back and forth. And I get to the woods yesterday, and I unscrewed the gas cap back here. I saw that it had a full tank of gas. That gas had sat in this thing probably for months now. And I have found this saw over 30 years of time, whether it's cold or not, at its worst condition. The hardest it is to start is when it's really cold. But it's not hard to start, if that makes sense. When it is dead cold, I set the full choke, pull it 5 times, and it's going to fire. I have seen times when it got to the 6th pull, and I'm like, gee, what's wrong? I pull it 5 times, and it fires. I go to half choke, pull it 1 time usually, and it fires, and we're ready to go. I noticed with the newer saw, I'm not sure how the priming mechanism differs because neither one of them use a priming bulb, so they're self-priming. The new saw, I might have to pull 7 or 8 times the first time to get it to fire. If pulling a saw 3 times more is a problem for you, you're going to love the older saw. If you can't pull it the extra 3 times, you probably shouldn't be using the chainsaw, but that's a whole nother object. So if you're going to buy a new saw, number one, do not go to, in my opinion, don't go to big box stores. Many of the name brand saws, even the very good name brand saws that you find at big box stores, are built by secondary companies that slap the name on there. Go to a dealer, and I highly recommend Stihl. Stihl, like I said, this saw is one you're looking at. This isn't a made-up story. I've used this saw for 30 years, and I've never had to clean the carburetor out. I've never had an engine-related problem. I've never had a failure to crank. Even when gas set in the saw for months at a time. Some years I'm busier than others, so some years I'll cut wood for a month or 2, get enough for my winter, and set this thing down and not touch it till the next year. So it'll be 10 months before I pick it up. It fires right up. When I moved up here, where I live now, I went... The first couple of years the first year I was here, we didn't burn wood because I was working out of town and I was commuting. And then when we started to burn wood, I was having to buy wood because there's not firewood on this property. It's just a standard housing lot. So I was buying wood. And so for 2 years, at least, and I bought wood. 1 year I didn't burn wood. I bought wood for at least 2 years. For 3 years, this particular saw wasn't being used. It was just setting. And I remember the trepidation that I had when I went and said, let me see if I can get my old saw to crank. 5 pulls. 5 pulls on a full choke, maybe 6, but it fired up in a reasonable amount of time and has run perfectly. That's good engineering. And when you're dealing with a saw that gives you quality and dependability and maneuverability and more than sufficient horsepower for the kind of wood that I'm cutting, you can't argue. I have cut trees in excess of 30 inches in diameter. You have about 15 inches of bar exposed on a 16-inch saw. I've cut half the tree from one side, half the tree from the other, and I've cut trees so far that I'd actually have to go kind of the middle and knock that edge out because it was more than the 30 inches that this saw can produce. It had sufficient horsepower to cut those kind of trees. And I just could not give higher praise for a saw that for a reasonable price. I'm trying to remember what I paid for this 30 years ago. I bought it used, by the way. I bought it used, and I think I had another saw that I traded in, so I had some allowance, but I think I had $150 in the saw. My goodness. You tell me a $150 investment that you made 30 years ago and you've used considerably that has held up like that. So for my money, if you're on the used saw market and you find an 021, you're wondering, is that big enough? For typical firewood purposes, this really will do you well. It will make you a dependable saw. It'll make you a saw that is sufficient for your needs. And it's a saw you'll pick up again and again like I did yesterday and went, wow, this thing handles so very well. So that's my review of the Stihl 021 chainsaw, and I give it top marks. I'm the Bald Guy, and these are Bald Guy Basics.